Okay, let's run it back. For those of you who haven't watched it yet, one of my previous videos was like a part 1 to the 7.0 gear. There, I covered details on artifact sets and the free craftable weapons. For this video, we're gonna do a part 2, where I cover details on Odette's signature and the Battle Pass weapons. As usual, I'll cover what they do and who can best use them in both optimal and niche scenarios. Let's not delay any longer. Additional info is down below, and captions are available if you need them. Without further ado, let's get started. First up, we have Odette's signature weapon, Whitelake Frostflower. It has a 674 base attack and a 22.1% crit rate substat. For its passive, when the user hits an opponent with their skill, their attack is increased by 8% for 8 seconds. This can occur once every 10th of a second with a max of 3 stacks, and each stack has independent durations. When you get all 3 stacks, the crit damage of stellar reaction damage is increased by 50%. Triggering stellar reactions or dealing direct stellar damage will also restore 4 energy, and this can occur once every 3.5 seconds. And all of these effects are off-field friendly. As an easy breakdown, you want units who specialize in frequent skill hits, attack scaling, and stellar damage. As Odette's signature, her kit is tailored to work perfectly with this sword. However, this is a sword that will only buff her damage, not the entire team's. So if you want Odette to lean more into a support role, this weapon may not be as necessary. For other characters, Cryo Traveler's kit also fulfills all of these requirements. Their skill does deal damage over time, so they can get the full stacks. They also have access to stellar damage, making the crit damage passive work. Finally, Chi-Chi recently got stellar buffs, and she is able to max out this effect with her skill. But she only deals direct stellar conduct damage once every rotation, which makes the weapon's personal damage stats less effective. On the flip side, you could make better use of the crit damage effect in stellar-swirl teams, since Chi-Chi can contribute to the regular reaction form, but since she can't trigger the reaction or deal direct stellar-swirl, she can't make use of the energy passive. In terms of a general attack and energy stat stick, this can be a good choice for her, but it's not recommended to pull this weapon specifically for her. And even in niche scenarios, I don't really have other users who would be able to use the sword. Looking at just the skill hit and attack bonus aspect, other sword users who have frequent skill hits aren't attack scaling. Meanwhile, users with attack scaling don't have frequent enough skill hits to get all 3 stacks. The closest I got to a niche option is Chiori and Alhaitham. Their main stats focus on defense and EM respectively, but there is semi-attack scaling present. Odette's signature is meant to be more niche, but thankfully the new Battle Pass options are a lot more generalized. The first weapon is the sword, Heretic's Molten Blade. It has a 510 base attack and a 27.6% crit rate substat. For its passive, when the user uses their skill, they gain an effect for 14 seconds. Every second, their attack is increased based on how much they traveled over the previous second. The minimum bonus between R1 and R5 is 18 to 36%, while the maximum bonus is 36 to 72%. This effect can trigger every 14 seconds, and it's removed early if the user leaves the field. I really liked Eonsan's kit having a movement-based buff, so this sword's passive is right up my alley. If we assume the sword works the same as Eonsan, little movements will contribute to the passive. A character simply doing their attack animation is considered movement, so they'll still get a bonus, albeit a smaller one. Because the bonus fluctuates on a per-second basis, you want to use this on characters who move around frequently, not just as a one-time effect. Keqing, for example, makes pretty nice distance with her skill, but this doesn't happen as often, so her attack bonus has pretty bad uptime. For a reference point, I tried a few sword users with Eonsan to see how well they maintained uptime on the Night Soul bonus. The first one that came to mind is Clorinde. She does really frequent instances of her special skill, which cause her to lunge a certain distance. Skirk also has really flowy attack animations, and the extra movement here was also really good at keeping a max Night Soul value. I tried Ayato since I figured his flash step attacks could count as covering a lot of distance, but it wasn't as strong as I predicted. And then every other sword user I tried was kinda bad in their movement, so they'll hit closer to the minimum effect, which, to be fair, is at least 40% at R5, which would almost be the same as a main stat artifact. Next up is the Claymore, forged by the Golden Melody. It has a 510 base attack and a 27.6% crit rate substat. Every 10 seconds, the user gets a harmonic movement effect that cycles through these bonuses: 18 to 36% attack, 120 to 240 EM, and 28 to 56% stellar damage. This occurs even when the user is off-field. Triggering a stellar reaction grants an additional instance of harmonic movement contrapuntal, which has the same effects as the harmonic movement active when the effect was triggered. This stacks with the original effect and can trigger once every 12 seconds. I could be wrong about this, but the way I interpreted the passive is that when you trigger the second effect, it takes whatever the current bonus is, but starts a fresh duration. So let's say I'm 5 seconds into the attack bonus. Getting the second effect starts a fresh 10-second duration on the attack buff, so for 5 seconds you get double the attack, but the next 5 seconds you get a mixture of EM and attack. And this just cycles through the bonuses. Regardless of how the passive works, these bonuses will focus on units who specialize in attack, EM, and stellar damage. So, Sandrone. Whatever the bonus is on, she can use it for her kit. She can trigger Stellar Conduct to get the stacking effect, but as a cryo unit, she can't trigger Stellar-Swirl. But on that note, Animal Claymore users like Sayu and Varka can technically use this in their Stellar-Swirl teams, with Sayu being the better of the two. She dual scales in attack and EM, so she can use both stats at once. In Stellar-Swirl, she can contribute higher damage in its regular reaction form. Varka can also do contribution damage in Stellar-Swirl, but since his main damage is purely attack scaling, the EM and stellar damage bonuses are more of a split scaling buff. Other cryo characters can technically use the Claymore in Stellar-Swirl to contribute reaction damage, but since they can't trigger the reaction themselves, they can't get access to the stacking effect. In Reverse Melt, timing this effect on Chongyun so that he has access for the attack or EM bonus can be useful. The same idea works in Melt or Vape for Pyro Claymore users like Diluc, Gaming, or Mawika, or Quicken with characters like Beidou. In terms of a more split-scaling role, Razor's known to be pretty good in Overload as both a DPS and reaction trigger, so he can use both stats there. Lunar Crystallized Navia can make use of attack and partial use of EM for the Moondrift damage. Once again, it's all a matter of making sure you're on attack or EM, since stellar damage is useless on the rest of these characters. The next weapon is called Frostbreath. It has a 510 base attack and a 27.6% crit rate. Wait a minute, nope. Why the fuck are you the only one that isn't crit rate in this set? Okay, 510 base attack and a 45.9% energy recharge substat. Triggering a cryo or hydro reaction increases the user's attack by 20 to 40% for 15 seconds, and it regenerates 6 to 12 energy for the other party members. This effect can trigger once every 16 seconds. The conditions for this weapon are definitely different. You want this on an attack scaler who can trigger hydro or cryo reactions, and because the substat is ER and not a damage stat like crit, this might be better on a support who cares less about dealing damage. The Polearm user needs to trigger on field, but its cooldown is only 16 seconds, so off-fielders can still use it during their setups. As cryo units, Rosaria, Shenhe, and Escoffier are really good at using it in any cryo team, even though Escoffier is more freeze-focused. Alyosha is stellar conduct focused, so he'll mainly be present in a cryo team. Eon-san is more generalized, so this only works in charged or conduct teams. Xiangling needs a lot of ER, and while she casts her burst, the initial hits can trigger a vape or melt reaction. This can proc the effect before her burst officially snapshots the attack buff. Other units who can use this aren't attack scaling, but can maybe still consider this if you need to provide more energy for the team. Candice is the only Hydro Polearm unit, but she's HP scaling. Itlua can use this in Lunar Crystallize, which is Hydro based, but he's defense and EM focused. Mika has HP, but can use this in superconductive battery someone like Eula, and the list goes on. It's one of those weapons that's really flexible on practically everyone, it's just a matter of whether the stats are worth using on that character. Next is the Catalyst, Clash of Kings. It has a 510 base attack and a 27.6% crit rate substat. Using a skill grants the user a 20 to 40% attack and 100 to 200 EM bonus. This lasts for 6 seconds and can trigger once every 12 seconds. But if the user hits with a charge attack while the effect is still active, the duration is extended by another 6 seconds, which can only occur once per use. You want to run this on characters with attack and EM scaling, and then you need to use a charge attack to extend the duration to 12 seconds. I'll talk about the best attack and EM units, and then I'll break it down further between who naturally uses charge attacks, and who would have to go out of their way to use one. For natural charge attack users, Klee and Yanfei can use both stats in a Vaporize team. Wriothesley's recent stellar buffs allow his damage to now scale on both attack and EM. Ningguang, Veressa, and Wanderer are all attack scaling, but have easy charge attack procs. Mona is also part of this list at C2, since her normal attacks can automatically trigger charge attacks. On the flip side, Nefer weaves in charge attacks, but is mostly an EM scaler. Then for characters who use both stats but don't have natural charge attacks, the list includes Yai, Lisa, Lanyan, and Heizo. Attack-only scalers would be Charlotte, Shanyun, and a pre-C2 Mona, and then EM scalers would be Nahida, Sucrose, and Citlali. As an additional note, many of the characters on the second list aren't damage dealers, so even the crit rate substat is less valuable on them. And finally, we have the new bow, Jade Vista. Like most of the others, it has a 510 base attack with a 27.6% crit rate substat. The user gains different bonuses based on the party members present. They get a 64 to 128 EM bonus for every unit who matches their element. Then they get a 12 to 24% attack bonus for every unit who is a different element. The two effects will share up to 3 stacks in total, with the EM bonuses applying first. And this last part basically just means that in those trials where you can have up to 5 characters, the bonus won't grant additional buffs based on that extra character present. But that's not really relevant in terms of regular gameplay, so we can just kind of ignore that. I would describe this bow as the anti-Linny weapon, since his team comps would provide the exact opposite stats that he needs. That's okay though, I have his signature, so I'm not the one suffering from this. It's a lot more flexible on users who can make use of both stats. That way, your team comp won't hinder their damage either way. Fischl and Sethos and Aggravate teams can use both stats really well. In a similar boat, Kale and Tighnari and Spread teams function the same way. Yoimiya, Ganyu, and Aloy can use this in Vape or Melt teams. And then Venti doesn't have dual scaling, but attack is good for his personal damage, while EM will be nice for his swirl damage. On the other hand, if you give this to a unit who can naturally maximize the EM or attack, this can also work really well. A character who wants to run EM could be Linnea. She can use the stat for Lunar Crystallize, and some of her best teams are a triple Geocomp, giving her 256 EM at R5. Alternatively, you could run this on attack scalers, who work as their sole element for a max of 72% attack. Chaska's teams almost never run a second Anemo, so she'll get the full attack stats. Child's Vape teams usually run him as a solo Hydro. And there's plenty of solo Electro-official teams, mainly when it comes to Overload. And on the support side, Yehoda can run solo Anemo. Even if you don't get the max stacks, there are a few teams where 2 stacks are common, which is still a 48% bonus at R5. I think Oraron is one of the examples where this will be more common, since I believe he runs double Electro a little more. Alright, that'll do it for this second part of the 7.0 weapons overview. If you enjoyed, consider leaving a like and subscribe to support the channel. Let me know in the comments if you're planning to go for Odette's signature or the Battle Pass weapons, and if you are, who you plan to use it on. If you want more information on the 7.0 artifact sets and the free craftables, that video is already available to watch. Thank you again for stopping by, and I will see you all next time. Bye!